well, what's up, guys? Welcome back to The Collision. Daniel here to talk about a new Alien film, Alien Romulus, just hit theaters. I have seen it, so let's talk about it. So Ridley Scott's 1979 movie, the original Alien, I think is a horror masterpiece. This is one of my favorite movies of all time. I think it sort of expertly orchestrates together just a very claustrophobic atmosphere and unrelenting tension. Obviously, a very iconic creature and also a very iconic heroine in Sigourney Weaver's Ridley. Unfortunately, with I think the exception of James Cameron's kind of more action-oriented sequel in 1986, Aliens, kind of every subsequent film in this series has just not come anywhere close to sort of the high standard that was set with the original film. Well, Alien Romulus, this is the ninth kind of main film in the Alien franchise, and director Fede Alvarez, newcomer to the series, is attempting to kind of reinvigorate the franchise by going back to the basics, going back to sort of some of those horror roots. And I will say, with some very, I think, stunning visuals, I think a very solid cast, and some effectively manufactured terror, Romulus is arguably the best Aliens film since Cameron's Aliens back in 1986. Even if I do think it is hindered by some of the same flaws that have derailed the series' other weaker sequels. And story-wise, this film is set between the events of those first two films, Alien and Aliens, with a whole new cast of characters as they attempt to scavenge a seemingly abandoned space research center that is orbiting above their planet. Unfortunately for them, the abandoned station turns out to not be quite as abandoned as they had hoped. And if you've ever seen any of the other Alien films, you likely know the drill from there. And in many ways, this film plays out in a very similar way to Star Wars The Force Awakens did, by retelling almost story beat by story beat the narrative of that original film, although just with a more modern coat of paint. Because in many ways, this film, Alien Romulus, could very well have been named Alien Greatest Hits. And it's almost interesting, in a very meta way. The film itself opens up with a spaceship literally gathering pieces of the wreckage of the Nostromo, which is the ship that Ridley blows up in the first film. And really kind of from there, in a more figurative sense, the filmmakers just continue to collect visuals, continue to collect story beats, kind of plot points from all across the series' long history. I think audiences looking for something fresh and new probably won't find a whole lot here to surprise them, but I will say it has been decades since those more familiar elements were utilized, I think, this effectively. And what makes the original Alien movie just such a masterclass in filmmaking by Ridley Scott is how he managed to instill that kind of sense of omnipresent dread that kind of causes you as the audience to hold your breath for the duration of the film, despite the fact that the xenomorph alien is only on screen for about 4 minutes in the entire film. And he really understood that, sort of the fear of the unknown, lurking in the darkness is always more terrifying than anything that he could put on screen. And I think Alien Romulus is able to capture some of that breathless tension, but only in spurts. Because the action sequences when the aliens are actually on screen are exciting, they are thrilling, but the movie takes its foot off the gas at least a little bit whenever those are off screen. I think the film more kind of plays on audiences' fear of visibly scary things, but doesn't always activate sort of the dark part of the human imagination. And I think to me, the problem with kind of relying more on the scene rather than the unseen scares is that just the more that the xenomorph aliens appear on screen, or the more number of them that appear on screen, just the less effective they become. And I think you see that even with the fact that this film essentially discards the creature altogether for the third act, but more on that in just a second. But make no mistake, this is still a very exciting, a very thrilling, I think at times a very scary film. The moments of tension when they do appear on screen are almost always very effective and well crafted, because there are some really excellent scenes in this film. Particularly, there's a scene where the characters have to sort of silently move through a dark room that's just filled with a bunch of the little face hugger creatures, or another very complex shot where the characters are floating through a corridor in zero gravity and the acidic blood of the aliens is swirling all around them. Just some very clever ways that they do utilize the action. And I should also just give a shout out too that I think the commitment in this film to more practical effects rather than just digital is a very welcome addition, and it makes the threats just feel a lot more tactile and immediate. Of course, for the scares and the thrills to work, the audience must obviously care about the human characters that are in peril, and the cast in this is great. Actress Kaylee Spaney, who made a name for herself in Priscilla, and who I really liked in the movie Civil War, she demonstrates once again why she is one of Hollywood's kind of rising stars. She does lack some of just that like raw toughness of Sigourney Weaver's character, but she just has like an earnestness and like a more relatability to her that does, I think, make her a worthy successor to Weaver's character. And kind of the other standout in this is David Johnson, who is excellent as the role of an android named Andy, and even just like a role that requires a lot of range, because throughout this film, sort of his android gets updated with different programming that drastically changes his personality, essentially requiring him to play multiple different characters and play them all well. And I think kind of despite the fact that he is not human and he is a robot, his character does add much of like the needed humanity to this story. The Alien franchise has always demonstrated a willingness just to swing for the fences, aim for some very big and I think controversial storytelling decisions, kind of true to form. Romulus's third act kind of twist climax is one that I'm sure will be very divisive, and obviously I'm not going to spoil that twist here, but to me it's akin almost to the moment in Jurassic Park 3 where the T-Rex is killed in order to, introduce to audiences a more, genetically created dinosaur hybrid as like a bigger, badder threat. And again, everyone's going to feel different about this. Personally, the ending to me just did not work, almost to the point that it derailed the entire momentum that the film had built. Again, to each their own, but to me, I think perhaps the day when the xenomorph alien is no longer considered threatening enough to carry the climax of a movie might be the day that it's just time to retire the creature. As far as content to consider, things going on the surface of this, this is a R-rated movie and it earns its R rating, so that there is definitely content, fairly graphic stuff to be aware of. As far as language, there is kind of heavy profanity all throughout, probably 30, 35 F words, as long as this collection of other crude or profane words. And also the names of God and Jesus Christ are both used at least once as well. As far as violence, this is a violent film. Aliens kill humans in just a variety of ways, such as you have an alien, as expected, kind of bursting out of a human's chest with a splattering of blood. Another man dies when kind of the acid blood of the alien ends up like dripping on him and kind of burning some of his skin. You have another character who has his face sort of punctured by the retractable jaws of the alien, and you see sort of the blood spatter, although you don't see like a close-up shot of the man's mangled face. And probably the film's most disturbing moment, and kind of slight spoiler, so I'll give you a second if you want to skip ahead a few seconds, but there is a scene where a woman kind of violently gives birth to an alien egg, which is, again, a disturbing moment. You see the blood. You don't necessarily see a close-up of it, but just the implications of it are intentionally, I think, disturbing. And I'll say, too, kind of due to some of the film's more like sexually influenced visual motifs, which I'll explain in just a second, can lead some of the violence, particularly towards the female characters in this, to be interpreted as having like some elements of like sexual assault. Because speaking of the sexuality, there are no like sexual themes or things as far as like the characters or even the plot itself, but there are several quite like sexually charged visuals with like the creature design, which was famously inspired by the artist H.R. Geiger. For example, like the alien's head itself is clearly shaped in like a very like phallic object and symbol, and even there's like a kind of an alien cocoon, which just seems intentionally designed to like invoke the sense of like a female's reproductive organ. As far as themes, worldview, things going on beneath the surface of this film, kind of an underlying theme in almost all, if not all, of the Alien movies to this point, is this sort of that dehumanization that comes with corporate greed. And in Romulus, that tension is kind of embodied most clearly in the character of Andy, who is the android, as he is sort of pulled between these opposing prime objectives to either do what is best for Rain, who is Spanley's character, and what is best for the company. And that commentary against like big corporations is very clear, but I do think this film also hints towards maybe some more interesting and even deeper themes. The aliens themselves in these movies, they've always been somewhat symbolic, I think representing different things based on what the filmmaker wants to explore. And I think there's also been kind of a significance to the fact that the alien creatures are birthed out of human hosts. And I think kind of given what transpires in the third act of this film, sort of that disturbing connection between birth and motherhood is made even more apparent in this film. Because there's one point in this film where kind of a representative of the big corporation refers to androids as being the backbone of our colonization, which I think is a statement that is even given more significance given by the fact that it's directed towards like the only black actor in the cast. Well, at the same time, it is revealed early on in this film that if sort of the protagonists, the main characters, if they are able to successfully escape and go to this, their paradise planet that they want to get to, that they do plan to abandon the android Andy, since their destination does not allow kind of non-human to live there. And kind of in both cases, from different perspectives, you see that the android is being used and discarded, and that kind of the same selfishness and like evil desire that does drive the corporation also rests in kind of every human heart. And in that sense, the film's climax, while I do think it's somewhat shaky from like a narrative perspective, does work as an effective metaphor to encapsulate that theme that the kind of true threat to humanity is not just sort of scary aliens out there in the unknown void of space, but is in fact ourselves, fueled by just selfish greed and just our vanity to try and play God. In the end, the xenomorph may no longer be the threatening presence that it once was. I think kind of the familiar narrative template lacks a lot of the surprises to prey upon audiences' imaginations, but this film does prove that the series is not dead, at least just yet. I think while it definitely falls short of the heights of like Ridley Scott's original Alien movie, Alien Romulus is undeniably to me just a good Alien film, sometimes even a great one. I think despite its sort of derivative storytelling approach and what I think is just a shaky, misguided third act, this is the best that the series has looked in decades. But hey, I would love to hear what you think if you're a big Alien fan, or hey, you're coming at this fresh. Love to hear your thoughts on it, and especially with that third act. If it worked for you more than it worked for me, don't be shy. Jump into the comment section. Let's have a conversation about this. Encourage you guys to subscribe to the channel, become a collider. Get lots of movie reviews and our Faith and Pop Culture podcast and interviews and just other fun stuff. Would love to have you be a part of that. But most of all, guys, thank you for watching. Stay safe and continue to collide with your world for Christ.